Have a good meeting.
Thank you, Mark. Today is March 18th, 2021. It is 10:01. I am Gary Lamel. We are calling to order the monthly South Carolina Commission on Disabilities and Special Needs meeting, and would ask that Commissioner Blackwood please read the notice of meeting statement at this time.
Meeting notice announcing the date, time, and place of the March 18th, 2021 Commission meeting was distributed March 16th, 2021 to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Central Administrative Office and on the website. The public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistance, and other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs requested in advance.
Thank you. The next item would be the adoption of the agenda as proposed. Does anybody have any changes, modifications, or additions to the agenda as proposed?
Mr. Chairman, the volume is down low. I can't hardly hear it.
Sorry, Commissioner. I apologize. I'll speak up. So the next item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda itself. I was asking if anybody had any changes, modifications, or additions to the agenda as proposed. Hearing none, would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved, Blackwood.
Second, Barry Melvin.
Thank you. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Hearing none, the agenda is adopted as proposed. The next item on that agenda is the invocation. Would call upon Commissioner Malphurs for that, please.
Thank you, sir. Let us pray. Dear Lord, thank you for allowing each of us as members of the commission to serve on this commission and to serve the state of South Carolina and all of those with disabilities throughout this wonderful state that we live in. Help us to never forget that each person that we serve and each person in this state has tremendous value and likes to contribute in some way. And so help us find ways for every person to contribute throughout all of those with disabilities. And help us to be mindful, as always, of the taxpayers of this state and the money that we are allowed to spend on the people's behalf, but spend it properly. Keep us safe throughout this stormful day and give us safe travels home. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the approval of commission meeting minutes. There are 3 sets of minutes. One from February 18th, one from February 24th, and one from March 1st. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to review that. Does anybody have any proposed changes, amendments, or corrections to any of the minutes as proposed?
Actually, I do.
Okay. With regard to which one?
I'm always one that does this thing. Sorry.
Yeah, that's good. Don't apologize for that.
I was just under executive director report. By the way, this is one of the best sets of minutes that we've done as yet, except for this one thing I want to correct. I think we need to clarify. If somebody don't want to clarify, it's fine. But I just want to commend our wonderful lady who does our minutes because they are truly increasing in accuracy and value and all that sort of thing. So we're very thankful. But under executive session for our main, I guess it would be
The February 18th meeting?
February 18th meeting, yeah. It says that Commissioner Rollins made a motion to,
What page?
the last page.
Number 8. Commissioner Rollinson made a motion to put that one,
Yeah.
hiring freeze in place.
No, not the hiring freeze, the motion for the, potential interim director. I think it should say that shouldn't it say that we're gonna interview an interim director instead of,
No, because we were not planning to interview one.
okay, that's not the way I thought it, okay.
as far as the March, I mean, I think it was, the original purpose of the March 1st meeting
Oh, yeah.
was to interview
Right,
an
right,
interim
right.
executive.
Okay,
But
I was reading the paragraph, we put the hiring freeze, okay. You're talking about the special call meeting.
I'm talking about the special
Okay,
call meeting,
okay,
that's what
yeah.
I'm concerned about. It says,
Oh, okay, yes, to interview, that's right, it should have said to interview.
that's right, to interview a person, and for the record on this meeting, they didn't show up for the interview, but our purpose was to interview a person.
Correct.
Okay. I just would like to have a change to say that.
So that's-
I'm not gonna fight over it.
yeah, that's on the last page of the minutes. Is that
So
correct?
just say, instead
That's right.
of meeting
last
with,
page.
it should say the purpose of interviewing a potential.
Yeah, so
Right.
until a special call meeting takes place on March 1st, 2021 at 11:30 a.m. at DDSN headquarters, at which time the commission will interview a potential interim.
That's correct.
Christie, do you have that change? Will interview a potential interim director?
Okay.
Okay, yep, thank you, Barry.
Thank you, Barry, I'm sorry.
Okay. That proposed amendment. Anything else with regard to any of the other minutes? Okay, so and I'm just going to do these as a group unless I hear an objection to it. All in favor of approving the proposed minutes from each meeting as amended, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, then those minutes are approved. Thank you. Okay, next, commissioner update. First, for the folks on the phone, any commissioner update from anyone on the phone?
No, David, no.
Okay, thank you. Ed?
I didn't hear it.
Ed, was there any commissioner update you had today, Ed? Ed, can you hear me?
One more time.
Ed, can you hear me? Yeah. Ed, can you hear me any better now?
I can hear you a little better, but not.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Did you have any commissioner update?
I heard it. Do you have?
Any commissioner update?
Oh, no, I do not.
Okay.
Update.
Okay, thank you. All right, for anyone in the room, anybody have a commissioner update?
I do.
Okay.
Yesterday I attended the Florence County Chamber of Commerce Outlook Luncheon, and Commissioner Alan Heidler, Florence DDSN, was named Public Servant of the Year. And I thought that was outstanding for one of our board commissioners he's also the chief of police in the city of Florence, and that he serves our board in Florence, and I just want to, our commission here to acknowledge that award.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. The next item would be public input. We do have one request for public input for Kimberly Tussaud, and I believe she wishes to address the sub-minimum wage issue that we are currently involved with, that we will call her.
Kimberly.
Ms. Tussaud, this is Gary Lamel with DDSN. How are you doing this morning?
Hey, Gary, how are you?
I'm doing just fine, thank you. We have you on speakerphone as part of your request for public input, and you are speaking today on behalf of Able, South Carolina. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, I turn the floor over to you. Thank you.
All right, great. Well, hello, Commissioner members. My name is Kimberly Tussaud. I am the President CEO of Able, South Carolina. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit organization with a mission to create greater access and opportunities for independence through empowering individuals with disabilities and promoting community inclusion. Our organization is also run and operated by the majority of professionals with all types of disabilities. So we didn't just learn our mission, we live it every day. We provide services to around 4,000 people with disabilities of all types of disabilities every year. And also because of the majority of our team of 53 staff members are people with disabilities, we do know the harmful and misguided practices of sub-minimum wage. And so I am here today to just talk a little bit about the bill that has been introduced. It's S533, and it's a bill to end sub-minimum wage in South Carolina. So I do want to just give you a little bit of history about of sub-minimum wage really quickly, and I know I have just a couple of minutes to talk, but as all of you know, when George H.W. Bush signed the Americans with Disabilities Act nearly 31 years ago, he said, let the shameful walls of exclusion come down. However, that shameful wall remains up, and we need to take it down in South Carolina. Although the Americans with Disabilities Act passed in 1990, which protects people with disabilities from employment and pay discrimination, there continues to be a loophole in the system due to Section 14C of the Federal Fair Labor Act that passed in 1938. That harms and discriminates against people with disabilities by allowing people to be paid less than minimum wage. That law was established in a time in 1938 that there were no available opportunities for people with disabilities. And since then, there have been protections put in place for workers with disabilities, including the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, the ADA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and tons of advancements with vocational rehabilitation, technology, and training. So the idea of this practice really has never met the needs of anyone with a disability, but most certainly does not meet where people with disabilities are today. Also, many of the businesses across South Carolina have already adopted inclusive hiring practices and advancements to include a more, and this also includes the majority of employers who once paid some minimum wage and decided that it was time to end such harmful practices. I do want to recognize that South Carolina has some amazing DSN providers who have already ended the sub-minimum wage practice in our state, and they have proved that this option is not needed any longer. A sub-minimum wage really has no place in South Carolina, as it is illegal discrimination against people with disabilities. People with intellectual, developmental, and other disabilities work in warehouses or workshops for literally pennies an hour, while the organizations and providers profit off of their labor. This discrimination is based on misconceptions about the abilities and contributions of people with disabilities in society, and honestly, it's quite appalling. I did send a report over to you all. It was a report that was issued in September of 2020 from the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, which is chaired by Tom Ridge. The report really highlights the reason why sub-minimum wage must end. The Civil Rights Agency noted that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities who are currently working in sub-minimum wage are not categorically different in the level of disability from those working in competitive integrative environments.
And Ms. Tussaud, I just want to, we do have a policy regarding sort of the length of time being roughly 3 minutes that I think that you've bumped up against that. So I'm going to ask if you can go ahead and get to your conclusion, if you don't mind, for me, so we're not bumping up against that number anymore.
Okay, yep. So there are a lot of national movements within ending sub-minimum wage and throughout the country, and I do think that South Carolina does need to get ahead of it. We've had a lot of support by Department of Ed, USC, the College of Special Education, VR, South Carolina Commission for the Blind, among others. But I do think this is something that the South Carolina DDSN does need to get behind to end. This bill would allow a three-year phase-out plan. The 3-year phase-out plan will include DDSN as a member of a task force to be on that committee to phase out some minimum wage in South Carolina and develop other structures. Providers and people who are also paid some minimum wage would also be included in the task force, along with advocacy organizations, VR, Commission for the Blind, and Department of Labor. And so just really briefly, we do.
All right, Ms. Tussaud, I'm gonna have to cut you off, okay? We've exceeded that window for you by quite a bit at this point, okay? Do appreciate the information. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay. Moving on, the next item on the agenda is a update on Brain Injury Awareness Month from Melissa Ritter and Joyce Davis.
Good morning. I'm Melissa Ritter. I serve people here at DDSN who have brain and spinal cord injuries, and we would like to recognize March as Brain Injury Awareness Month. So today I've asked Joyce Davis, who is the Executive Director of the Brain Injury Association of South Carolina, to speak to you a little about brain injury, her association's work in the state to raise awareness of brain injury, which is often referred to as a silent epidemic. So I will turn this over to Joyce.
Thank you, Melissa. Morning, Joyce.
Hey, good morning. Okay, for those of you that do not know, the Brain Injury Association of South Carolina was founded in 1998. We're a nonprofit organization which supports those with brain injury and their caregivers. Our mission is to create a better future through brain injury prevention, research, education, and advocacy. These are a few of our programs: information and referral, resource facilitation, and brain injury resource information. We provide that to Level 1 trauma centers, new traumatic brain injury patients. Brain Injury Safety Net program, which is for youth with brain injury. And we provide 9 support groups across the state for caregivers as well as brain injury survivors. And then this month, we're starting a young adult support group for young adults with brain injury. And that's all going to be online. We also provide education and training about brain injury. We provide a brain injury specialist certification course, a brain injury fundamentals training for direct caregivers, as well as for direct support staff and caregivers. Advocacy, we advocate for different agency budgets that provides resources and services for people with brain injuries. We're often at the State House advocating for DDSN's budget, not this year because of COVID, but we provided a lot of advocacy around the area of the vaccine for individuals with disabilities and moving them to an earlier category, which is right now. And this year, Governor McMaster did declare March as Brain Injury Awareness Month in South Carolina again. And just so you know, every 9 seconds, someone in the U.S. sustains a brain injury. Every year, more than 3.6 million people sustain an acquired brain injury, and at least 2.8 people sustain a traumatic brain injury. This year, the theme for Brain Injury Awareness Month is More Than My Brain Injury, which this aims to destigmatize the injury and highlight the diversity of the brain injury community and empower those who have survived. The campaign was designed by support group leaders, advocates, and people living with brain injury. And it allows survivors to tell their stories so they're not defined by their brain injury. And it also puts a significant interest in the different types of brain injury, like concussion, stroke, overdose, and abuse. BIASC is promoting this through social media, email, and doing weekly drawings for brain injury survivors who participate. We provided the same cards that y'all received in your envelopes to each legislator in our state. We want to really, make sure people understand what brain injury is. And then this year, we're also selling T-shirts and masks, which are big. This isn't one of them, but the masks are really a big hit this year. In closing, I would like to thank DDSN Haskey staff, Melissa and Leanne and the others, for collaborating with us on a lot of different initiatives, injury prevention, education, just to name a few. And I want to also thank you, the commissioners, for your support and expertise you provide DDSN. Now we're going to show a quick video. This video is going to include a song that, it was actually a poem that was written by a mom of a brain injury survivor. Her daughter sustained a brain injury, and so she wrote this poem and put it into a song. And so the faces that you're going to see in the pictures are going to be of many brain injury survivors, caregivers, BIASC staff, other volunteers. And it's just a really nice song, and it's available online if you want a copy of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
She was always happy, always full of life. She never met a stranger. She always had a smile. She lit up the room as soon as she walked in, and everyone was a friend. But an instant, everything changed. When that truck hit the tree, her whole life rearranged. The doctor said she's fine. She'll be confused for a little while. She will be back to her old self in time. We waited. She no longer trusted. Joy and laughter became a distant memory. I wanna be made over. I want the pain to stop. Please God hear my prayer and show me the way out. My mind is so confused.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you for that update. All right, moving on. Next item on the agenda is the commission section. So first we'll recognize Commissioner Malphus regarding the policy committee.
Thank you. The primary, well, we did several things during the policy committee meeting this time around, and the primary thing that we actually got completed was the policy that relates to the Freedom of Information Act and the amount of money that we charge, and for people that ask us for Freedom of Information Act requests, and also some other things about that. The primary thing was that we've changed to be more like other agencies as to what we charge. There's no more free pages, and it's 20 cents a page, and there's some other things. And also, we've also decided that the providers, human service providers, all the different agency, the three major agencies that we have would not be charged anymore for Freedom of Information Act requests. And I would ask that this policy, I'm sure everybody has it, would be approved today, because we're having a lot of requests for these requests because we've become famous in the last couple months. So, and so we're asking this policy to be approved today so that we can fix this, and then if it will be put out for public comment, and if by some chance we decide to change something in it, we can approve it next month, but it's unlikely that it'll change from what it is now, I would say, in spite of the public comment that's coming. But, so that's the main thing I wanted to say about that today, is that I'd ask for it to be approved today. There's obviously, we call it an emergency approval. There's obviously a way in our policy that causes the commission to be able to do that without public comment. And even though we're going to put it out public comment later, it'll take another month to approve it again. So I would ask that come out of committee as a motion that we approve it today, and that it's considered an emergency provision, and that it's approved today.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
I do have one question. When we did, those who got the pricing together, did we compare that pricing to other state agencies? Okay, I just wanted, like
Yes.
HHS, we're aligned with HHS.
That's what this is what HHS does.
Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure we're within those limitations.
It's comparable.
Okay, good.
Okay. So as I understand it, the motion coming out of committee, and we'll treat it as a motion in a second since it's coming out of committee, is to adopt the policy as proposed to be reviewed pending public input.
That's right, but it's adopted today as proposed, and unless we decide to change it, it'll change, but otherwise it won't.
Okay. All right.
But wait, let me ask a question, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Does that mean that we can use it before it goes to public comment or not?
Yes. Yes, if we finish it today, we can use it before public comment.
And I'll be honest with you, I'm not, Commissioner Malford, you made reference to some emergency policy stuff like that. We've not done that in the past, so I'm not familiar with that. Off the top of my head, is that part of the bylaws? Yeah, that's fine.
There are two separate directives, well, one directive and one commission policy, that one of the committee procedures, which has language in it that says that there will always be an attempt to do a 10 business day external review, except in rare circumstances. That's the gist of it.
Gotcha.
So I think what Commissioner Malthus is saying is, because we want to start using this now, he's asking it to come from committee with revisions for approval here. We'll put it in practice, but we'll do external review. We'll bring it back to committee April 13th, and then you all will do another approval if there's a change.
So essentially, it's provisionally going in place in March.
Yes.
Be reviewed again in April after the public comment period.
I think
Okay.
just because of the amount of interest and concern about that, we wanted to kind of actively, is that what you were thinking? Malthus?
That's right, this is exactly the point of that sentence that we could have, I should have brought to read, but I didn't.
That makes sense. I appreciate that.
Yep.
I just needed clarification.
Thank you for that clarification, Susan. All right, any additional questions? Any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, then that motion is approved and will then be subject to the review. Let's go ahead and put that on the agenda for next time to redo it after the public comment period. Okay?
That's if it changes, right? That's if we recommend a change, correct?
I think we have an update I think we have an update regardless. If there's no changes, then we may not have to have a motion, but let's at least have it on the agenda
Okay, that's fine.
to get an update
That's fine.
about it, either way. And worst case scenario, we make a new motion, best case, we don't. I think it's be the appropriate way to handle it.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Anything further from the policy committee?
We have some other updates to mention. We'll be making some other, we made some updates to the appeal and reconciliation and the conflict-free case management and the medical and dental treatment and the use of facilities outside the use of the facilities outside of our, for off-duty employees. And also, we'll be bringing those for approval after the staff is finished with that. And then, we have some other ones that we've continued until the next meeting, which is the sexual harassment policy that's new and the executive limitations policy. We'll be bringing that back up at the next meeting, and a couple of employment policies. So they're really going to be reevaluated next month, just so you know. I just wanted y'all to realize we were busy.
Okay.
But anyway, and then, didn't we make a policy obsolete?
We'll do that when there's another directive that's associated with the federal grant application approval. I think it moved from policy committee to finance and audit back to policy committee.
Mm-hmm.
At this time, staff are recommending that we insert a line in executive limitations to serve that function and mark that federal grant application policy obsolete. So we'll finalize that in the April meeting.
Okay. Okay, I don't think any of that needs a motion that I just said. I would
Let's just update.
information. So, so that's our policy report policy committee report for this month.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the agenda, going on to old business. First is the IDRD waiver renewal update. Susan.
This might be the quickest item on your agenda today, unless you have lots of questions, which I'm here to answer. Last month, I provided an update on the kind of roadmap for the intellectual disability and related disabilities waiver renewal. So I know you all are familiar with this information, that we're on the glide path to have everything approved by DHHS in mid-April for their presentation to their advisory committee, and then ultimately a submission to the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the federal entity, in July, so that the waiver can be renewed by January 1st. So that's kind of our path. My update for you this month, again, is brief, but next month will be longer, because I'll be asking for your approval of our official recommendations to DHHS on that renewal. At the current time, we are working, I say daily, but it might be every other day, with DHHS and the technical assistance folks. We're certainly doing a lot of intra-agency meetings to work on the specifics. It's a very complicated document that has lots of rules, so we're really benefiting from that free technical assistance that we're receiving through CMS, and are having a good, it's a good learning experience for everyone, from the fiscal area to the operations area to certainly our program and policy area. One thing we're spending a lot of time on are those performance measures. So I think I talked about them last month as being, the application for the waiver explains all of the nuts and bolts of what will be delivered, but there are these items called assurances. So there's data collected to measure if the state is performing as expected on those assurances. And so the performance measures are kind of the way we spell out what data will be collected. And because of the systems that are part DHHS data collection systems and part DDSN collection systems, that can be a really intricate process. So we're spending a lot of time on those. I'll share those with you next time. And we are doing some additional tool development for that data collection, so we're not having to do kind of dicing and splicing. We can get direct data. We don't have to use samples. We will do 100% data collection. So we think it'll be a truer picture. And specifically, we're developing a very simple case management monitoring tool, which I think we've talked about in the past as necessary, so that case managers are really monitoring the services being provided through each individual's plan, making sure they're the right amount, their health and welfare is measured. And so we think you'll be pleased with the kinds of advancements we're working on, and I'll be glad to come back next month and explain those. Are there any questions?
I would just say try to make sure that you get the recommendations that we're going to be voting on next month
Yeah.
to us as far in advance as you can. I know from past experience with this, that can literally change on like a daily basis,
Yeah.
but try to get it as far in advance
Sure.
as you can, so that we can do it.
Oh,
Meeting, yeah.
sure, yeah. I've envisioned kind of a table with a lot of details in it, and certainly would love to share that in advance.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Any additional questions for Susan? I don't have any. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, next item on the agenda is the Band B&I switch to fee-for-service update. Recognize Pat.
Good morning. Old business, I'm with Band B&I switch. We've been camped out here since November, and I hope to bring some clarity to this issue today. Have a solution to move forward with trying to address some underfunded waiver residential beds. And I will be asking for a motion to move forward on that particular issue. I'm just going to give you a quick backdrop so we can frame this issue to get to the heart of the motion. And also, I think as we've been talking about the Band B&I switch, I think we're losing sight of, this is a fee-for-service move. On January 1st, we moved our at-home bands to fee-for-service, which is about 26% of our band dollars and most of our transactions. And now the next step is to move residential bands to fee-for-service. And when you get, that particular step, I don't think we've talked too much about it is because the mechanics of that is going to be, we must get individual rates from HHS for our individual residential settings. Right now we have one rate of which we allocate to our settings, and that system has to end. And so the general timeline is, as Susan was talking about the IDRD, when they get that waiver downrange and have time, their next step is to build residential settings with enough specificity. With the most particular area is staffing. Staffing is the big missing link in our residential settings, because we can't really commit what the price is until we set the staffing levels, and we really can't hold people accountable until we set the staffing levels. So we will have to build those hopefully late spring, early summer. And then once we build those out, now HHS is in a position with Mercer or another actuary to actually price them out. And then ultimately, when this gets done, there has to be a IDRD waiver amendment to add them to it. So if the renewal is going to be on effective January 1st of next year, this amendment is going to be after that date sometime sooner rather than later. So that's the trajectory of getting to the finish line. And I say that to put the Band B&I issue into some context, where this is an issue that needs resolution, and I think we're well on the way to resolving it. And at the end of the day, this is part of the change process is when we pulled the bands back in, because we never rebalanced them, that was a band that actually created, on average, excess revenue for providers. And they use that revenue in a capitated model for other services. And so we pulled that back. We use the fiscal year 19 benchmark of about $11 million. We pulled it back and we tried to soften that blow by pushing out $7 million with passing through the rates, which was part of our requirement at HHS. So there's about $4 million that the system overall revenue went down, and providers feel that at some level, depending on how much day services they have and how many ICFs they have. A fairness factor, let's look at their waiver residential settings that are underfunded. And if we find underfunded residential settings, that we would then make a recommendation back to the commission to try to remedy those with some of these excess funds, so that maybe things that money that traditionally flowed over, we can flow it over in another way. The first step, the first step was an attempt, kind of a good faith attempt to say, hey, providers, we realize that we're going to try to increase some of these bands, but at the same time, we know within this population of 3,300 settings that have high-low capabilities. There are some that actually went down that we didn't know about. So we started with basic voluntary cooperation of, hey, if you have G bands, 82,000 a year, and you have some H bands, 100,000 a year, that conditions had changed with these two types of individuals, and you want to balance them out to readjust them, let's do it now before we start adding money. And so we put that voluntary request out, and not all providers participated. The ones that did, we got about 100. And at that time was, the issue popped up, what's the methodology of making these determinations? The traditional methodology, as Rufus could probably tell us, is very, it doesn't use a tool. It's basically a file and good judgment by the DDS and employee, which is not really a best practice. The best practice is actually to have a tool, but we don't have a tool. So HRST was raised as, hey, let's take this data we got from providers and bring some standardization to it. And actually, I think it was a good exercise to really bring some rigor to some data that maybe in the past we've never done. And so Kyla and her team went out, collected the data, and not part of this meeting because of time is essence here, but she did learn a lot of interesting capabilities of the providers out there when she did this. But the short story is we went through, don't hold me to the perfect number, approximately 80, it's 45 and 39. There you go. And basically we went through it, and we did the HRST. We found someone in the provider, talked to them. They call them an informant, which scares me a little bit. I don't like that word. And a witness, how about that? No informant. And they gave the information, they ran the system, and it prompted through, and it teased out relevant data on behaviors and medical risks that affect someone's cost or acuity issues. And of the 45 we did from G's to H's where they're going up, I think on a 6-point scale, all but 2 of them were in the 4, 5, 6 range, which was in the direction of higher needs. And the ones going down, if there's 39 going down, all of them were in the 1, 2, 3 scale. So on this spectrum of 6, it kind of showed us what, even though the providers may not have given us what I'd say robust or standardized data, by using this standard tool, we were able to tease those 2 things out. So actually, it kind of validated that our providers knew the right answer, but maybe didn't provide the data in the right format, or didn't have maybe the ability to articulate it in the detail we needed. But at the end of the day, it validated what they were doing. It's a factor that when we ultimately make decisions on approving ups and downs, which Rufus and his team will do it, because they make the G's to H's and H to G determinations every day. That'll be a fact that they will use in that determination. And I put that aside. That is just something that was decided to be done to kind of just like have an attempt to do some reconciliation before we get to the money part. We're now at the money part. And when you look about the money part, the tool that we have in our tool bag is called the outlier process. Matter of fact, I think that's the only tool in our tool bag. We do not have assessments that equate to residential setting rates. So my proposal is moving forward that we just use the tried and true tool of outliers, which we've used for many, many years. Unfortunately, because of financial matters, we have not approved residential outliers in 3 years. We currently have 100 residences approximately that have about $7 million of outlier money. What we're going to do is I propose that we do a canvas, we lay out the criteria, we're very specific in the framework of how we get the information back, and then we will run the traditional outlier process. And the traditional outlier process is one where the provider has to demonstrate that they've spent money on the individual that exceeds the threshold, which is approximately $27,000, Rufus. So it's a pretty much a, even though there's some averaging in there and there's some household balancing, it gives you the notion that, yes, they have put forth funds at an outlier, exceptional, high end for a residential individual that really exceeds the capabilities of the bands, and it would be fair to recognize that and really adjust their payment to match what they're paying. And so we roll that process out. We'll have whatever deadlines we set, and obviously the providers, and there's about 5 or 6 of them that have been most adversely impacted by the B&I switch. We will certainly prioritize them and do them first. And this is kind of the old business, and I don't want to, I still need a motion to move forward on that issue, but when we get into the new business and we talk about the financial issues in front of us, you know, we elected to look at the waiver residential beds as a way to, hey, take some excess funding and address a need. And what we'll talk about in new business is, you know, the needs out there from, you know, the other two, really the other 3 business lines that the boards have. ICFs, I'll show you information where the ICFs are essentially all losing for the past year, and that's been a chronic problem. And we'll talk about day programs, which the rate we pay them is certainly south of what the costs are for providers. So there's another issue, there's another need. And then on the residential side, I think we put so much extra state funds into those rates already. It doesn't guarantee there's going to be excess funds for provider, but certainly it has funding in it. And my point to that is we're focusing on residential waiver beds when in fact we have ICFs and day programs that are equally in need. And that as we go forward into these new issues, unlike the last 4 years, we actually have resources to address some of those with the 6.2% leftover FMAP, as well as the new 10% FMAP that's coming our way. So my particular motion is let's address the B&I issue with the traditional outlier model, and we'll true up those that justify expenses that have been languishing for years. I think that's a legitimate need that we can meet, but I do believe there's other needs that we have to be aware of and consider. So I make a motion that.
You can't make a motion.
Oh.
But you can request.
I'd like to recommend.
Yeah, we recommend, please. But I would ask before you do that, well, go ahead and make a motion.
What do you recommend?
I would recommend that now that we're gonna finish the G to H swaps, which is cost neutral, and if there are G's to H's that we can't approve, you know, we can't approve them. But if there's a G to H going up, there's going to be an H to G going down, and allow us to finish that process under our traditional model, which Rufus will take. Basically, he'll look at the provider's package, he'll look at the HRT information, he may look at some financial data depending on the risks involved, but it's a low risk model because we're swapping, you know, providers are basically, you know, they're providing, they're offering up an H band and lowering to a G. So you got to trust them there. So there's a level of trust. I don't think that's a hard transition to do. But when we get into moving upwards, we just want to go out with a canvas to get fresh outlier data, bring it back in a standardized format within timelines that we can address, process. And again, we don't have unlimited money for these outliers, but we do have some money for the excess band. And when we come back and make justifications, I think the data is a lot harder because the board will have already had to commit funds to show that there is a need, absent unusual circumstances. So my recommendation is allow us to use the outlier process to canvas, and any residential bed that can pass the outlier test, we'll come back to the commission and ask for approval for outliers, knowing that we do have some excess fundings from the B's and I's to help that unmet need for the past 3 years.
Okay. Questions?
I have one. I mean, I don't, might be a question or it might be a comment, sort of. But the biggest thing I would say about this is that I don't have a problem with using outliers, but you can use what they say. I just think we need to be very careful that when we adjust these outliers, that we do not adjust it more, because you said we were adjusting it to the amount they pay. So we don't want to adjust to more than they pay because they already are increasing every time we turn around in reserves. So we don't want to give them additional reserves with this outlier situation. Provide them.
That reserve is a very,
That's the point of going fee for service.
it is a fact, but it is, you can't look at the reserves in isolation.
No, I'm not suggesting that. What I'm
Yep.
suggesting is that this is really a difference from what we, well, in a way it is, but not really residential, I'm sorry, because I was talking about Van Dees and Ice, but in Van Dees and Ice, that if they had a deficit, we were gonna have them have a loan. And I guess this is a little bit different than that, because this is residential rates you're talking about. But, the key thing is, you want to adjust them for the amount of money they're paying, not to add money to their coffers.
Oh, I agree.
That's not the point.
They have to spend at least $27,000. If they spend $24,000, they don't even get in the game because they're not an outlier. If they spend $31,000, they get in the game, and if we validate what they spend, correct me if I'm wrong, Rufus, we're just gonna make the outlier equal to actual expenditure. So the answer is,
That's what I'm saying. We want to make the outliers equal to the expenditures and not additional, because you're going to end up.
yes, sir.
with more money they're going to get in their reserves, and they already are increasing in reserves every month.
All right, and I've got a question. Are we tracking that information as to what those expenditures are, so that when we go to HHS, we can say, okay, you're paying $5 for this service when it actually costs $10? Are we tracking that action so that we make sure when we flip this to fee for service completely, that we're able to explain to HHS why those rates need to be increased? Being done?
It's done through cost reports. Also, we've communicated, I mean, put it this way, we're already 22 million in state funds above what we get.
Okay.
So if we add some more, we'll be 24 million in state funds to what we already commit. And it is recognized that we have not kept our Medicaid rates up to what is the need. And in order to compensate for this lag effect, we keep on doing what we're doing today.
Okay.
Okay, so the answer is yes, 100%.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're prepared, because, I want us to get that rate increase if it's truly needed. And I want us to be able to prove that it is needed.
Yes, ma'am.
What, any estimates of the total outliers? I mean, we've got $4 million that we took out of the system, essentially. Any idea of what we might be?
Rufus was pondering that number. I don't want to prejudge it, but because it is what it is. If you haven't spent the money yet, you can't get in, you can't apply.
But I don't know if we want to prejudge it right now, then let's just don't. I don't know if we want to do that in a public setting right now or not.
We currently have 100 in the system. I expect nowhere near 100. 100 outliers are currently in the system.
Okay. Well, let's just, would it be better for you to address that later so we'll know more?
Okay.
You have a problem with that, Gary?
Yeah, that's, again, I'm not asking for anything commitment. Basically, we're looking at, you think it's under 100 outliers.
100 are an existing.
Right.
And if we say we add 50 more.
Right.
50 times, say $30,000. Okay, it's 1.5. So we're not going to get to the
4 million.
But which leads to, hey, we have excess funding in the system, and when we talk about the new issues, we'll talk about that.
It's just, and again, I'm not asking in any.
It's not going to break the bank, but
As a commitment, hard number.
No.
Just a preliminary ballpark.
yes.
Rough numbers. Okay. That's fine.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we move forward with what has been recommended to us by our staff, and that if at any point we feel that there needs to be a change to this, we will address it. I don't know exactly how to word what you just said.
Do you don't have something in writing, a motion in writing?
I can.
Well, I mean, if I understand it, correct me, okay? Is that what the motion was to approve the recommendation of staff to use outliers.
That's right.
As a partial bridge of the funding gap that's existing right now.
That's correct.
That's the
That's it.
recommendation.
As simple as it gets.
That's correct.
Is that an appropriate summary?
That is correct.
Okay, all right.
Very good. Thank you.
So that's the motion. We have
Understanding that the devil's in the details,
100%.
and and that we have, and like she said, we have an opportunity to change it in the future if we decide.
Always. Okay.
Yeah, but it needs to be clarified around here. Go ahead.
Okay. Do we have a second? All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, that motion is approved. All right. Pat, next item would be the update on the cost reports.
Cost reports, Myers and Stauffer, CPA firm is doing fiscal year 13, 14, and 15. They are going to give us the first draft fiscal year 13 next week. That's with these step downs, and that is basically their draft outcome. And so we'll have to proof that for quality, and hopefully we'll get a tentative number and turn that over to HHS, because I think 13, 14, and 15 are probably going to look alike, and that would kind of be a bellwether of our potential liabilities for payback. So I think that's an important one to get. 14 and 15 are actively being worked too. We're sending them information, they're cranking them, and I think we should have them certainly by early summer. But they are all going to be done in the near term. Obviously, you know, 16 and 17 are HHS. That leaves us 18, 19, and 20. We've elected to do fiscal year 19 because 19 is our last non-COVID year, and that will give us a picture of what our costs are, most recent costs for fiscal year under non-COVID conditions. And that is a critical report. We have 4 accountants working on that near full-time downstairs. We've contracted with a former cost director who's really sped up our development of our staff. Our biggest problem has been we lost that institutional knowledge, and now we're getting it back. And he promised us to get it sooner, but history has shown things don't happen soon as we would like them to be. So I have every expectation we'll have it done by early to mid-June. And that is a critical report because all the rates that I'll talk about later that we basically, and I got to thank HHS, we're reconciling the Mercer report from 2019 to get that to a point where they can make some conclusions about market rates. And that cost report is going to be a key element to add some corroboration to our rates as to what's happening and hopefully give them confidence to pull triggers on rates to move us forward. So that 19 is the number one priority downstairs, absent paying bills.
Okay, so the cost reports that we're missing were 14 through 20, correct?
Nope. 16 and 17 are completed, sitting at HHS.
Okay.
And they have very little cost settlement issues in them.
Okay.
13, 14, and 15. And then 18, 19, and 20 just closed. So the 13, 14, 15, one's going to be done hopefully very shortly, and hopefully all 3 by the next, well, I hope in early summer. But the key thing there is I think they're going to look alike, and we have costs. We never get any. And a one-way cost settlement is if we have more cost than they gave us revenue, the federal government's going to say thank you. We're not going to get money back.
Right.
But we may have some liability, so that's important to get 13 to give us a clue as to what our risks are.
Okay.
And then 18, 19, and 20, we're going to do in-house now that we're building a staff. And 19 is the pivotal one to help us with the rates, because if we do 20 is going to be, it will not be representative of what normal costs look like.
Okay. And when's 20 closed and when is it closed?
20 closed on June 30th of 20. We got the financial, I think we have all but one financial statement in, cost reports from providers. They're supposed to be in by October, November frame. So we have all the data we need to crank it.
Okay.
It's just not crankable because of capacity right now.
Okay. All right, and who do we turn these into? Those get turned into HHS?
HHS, and what they do is they look at the money they paid us in billings. then they look at our costs. If our costs are greater than our billings, we don't owe them anything. But
Sure.
if our costs are less, then we have to settle and pay that back. And I'm hoping in the next, when we truly go fee for service, this cost settlement should go away. Because the main reason we have to cost settle is we're the state agency intermediary. And if we get out of the loop and it's just rate to provider, now all of a sudden, we're not responsible for
Good.
that cost.
Good. All right. And the plan going forward is, Alex kind of want us to start thinking about the plan going forward with these cost reports so that we kind of have a time frame for every year to be able to say, okay, let's see the cost reports for this year. So if we could put that on the radar so that in the future, we don't get.
It should be,
Okay.
well, it literally should be, we should have cost reports February, March,
Okay.
unequivocally, because the reason we're so behind our rates is because we don't have the cost reports.
Certainly.
So it is so critical to us, and we think, it's just an exercise, but it is the number one proof of need.
So it's February, March of the year following.
Yeah.
So for 2020, it should be this month, last month or this month.
Should be today.
Should be today. Okay, all right. And that's okay. I mean, we understand obviously that we're catching up, but just for boards in the future, we want to make sure that they understand that.
Yeah, and that's part of we talked about that in terms of the contract with the board as far as their requirement to turn over that data. And that's another element that we're going to have to address going forward, making sure we get the good data from them.
That's right. Okay. Thank you for answering those questions.
No problem.
Very well explained, Pat.
Thank you.
Any additional questions about the cost reports?
No, except to say that's one of the biggest tragedies that that we've ever had as an agency, I think, is the fact that they were not done. But you did a good job explaining it, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Pat. Okay, next moving on to the internal audit monthly report. Kevin.
Good morning, everybody. So just sort of giving you a summary of where we were last month, our activities for this past month. With the agreed upon procedures reports, again, we have 40 boards. We've received all those. 26 have been through the QA process, 9 are in process, and we had 5 that we sent back to the CPA because they didn't follow the template and they didn't follow the guidelines. So we're waiting on those to come back from the CPA, hopefully correctly. We also have 10 private providers that have the same state fiscal year, which is 6/30. So we have 10 of those, 5 have been reviewed, 4 in process. One of those asked for an extension to move from a 6/30 fiscal year to a 12/30 to a calendar year, which we granted, which was allowed per the policy. So theirs will be due by the end of March, and they'll give us an 18-month reporting period to cover that gap. We have 3 privates that have a federal fiscal year ending on 9/30. We've received all their reports, completed 1, 2 are in process. And then we have 31 providers, private providers. They have a fiscal year that runs, that's a calendar year, 12/30. So they have 90 days to get us the reports. So those are due by the end of the month. Those are starting to roll in now. I'll get those reviewed. Those are predominantly, like I said, they're privates and predominantly they're early intervention providers. So any questions on where we stand on the ROAS? We issued a couple of technical assistance letters since last we met. One of them went out yesterday. I don't know if y'all had a chance to look at it. And it was just cleaning up our website. As I mentioned, we're doing an interpreter services audit. As part of that review, this became an ancillary review. We just saw that our website wasn't updated with correct information with some of the EI providers. Some of them have been out of business since 19. Some of them aren't listed on there. And that's a resource that families use. BabyNet uses it when they're referring families. So we need to make sure that information is accurate and kept up to date. I think there were a total of 7 providers not listed, 4 providers that needed to be removed. And I think a process is going to be developed where those program areas will work with IT to get the information to them so they can keep that current. Any questions with regard to that? All right, moving on. The second TA letter was just a room and board calculation, one of our providers had included vehicle depreciation in their room and board rate. That's not allowed. Cost to work with them to readjust the rate, removing that. That created a payback for some of those individuals because it reduced the room and board rate. We went in and we sampled that. The total payback was $43,600. We looked at a sample that included $19,100. That was about 44%. And all those individuals have been paid back in full. I will say that same issue has popped up with several other providers in terms of some type of cost being included, not necessarily just vehicle depreciation, but cost being included in the room and board. I think we have about 7. So we're working with costs they will notify the providers and we will go back. So you will see many more of those coming to you. We will work through all 7 of them and make sure the individuals, if there's any kind of payback through the room and board, that they receive their money.
The last time we dealt with room and board, we had said that we wanted to design a very simple framework. Plug in these numbers, it tells you what room and board is.
Right.
Is that not being used for these?
Because
again, we dealt with this problem 5 years ago.
there is a template.
Yeah.
And it clearly said, like in this example, it clearly says you can only use building depreciation. And yet, when they started looking at it, they're clearly using vehicle depreciation. So I think finance is starting to work on that room and board directive next week, and they have asked us to join them in a consulting capacity. And yes, we had made the comment many years ago, if we could have a simple template that fill in the numbers. That's all you have to do. If you fill in these numbers in these categories and you do the math, you're going to get your room and board rate. And there is something similar to that now. There's a chart and a listing of allowable items.
I mean, I thought we emerged from that whole room and board the last, and again, this was 2015, with a template. Are you saying the template doesn't exist?
No, there's a chart in there that basically says, here's the categories, you can put your numbers in here.
Uh-huh.
But again, it's in this particular case, and in the other cases that I'm referring to, from what cost has told me, is they included costs that should not have been included, which is why cost has to approve the rate.
Okay.
Any other questions with regard to that? Then I'm going to move on to, we issued an audit of case management within the DDSN system. This was unusual for us because it was based on a survey of the providers. Typically, we look at information from a historical perspective. And here we were asking them, and the reason for this is we moved to conflict-free case management and it went fee for service to sort of check the stability of the system and make sure that we were going to have enough case management providers in the system. So we did that through a survey. I cannot thank the provider network enough. We got really great participation. We had 85% participation rate, which shows, I think, that it is meaningful to them and they wanted their voice heard. They wanted input. I think the best news that came out of that is, so we had 35 responses. We compared that to January billings where we had 41 case managers who billed for that month. But I think the best news that came out of that is we really only had one case management provider who said they were getting out of the business. So I think that is great news. And we also had several providers that said they wanted to expand. And those expansion numbers, they're listed in here. Again, it's just by provider. It was an anonymous survey, so some of them, that was an open-ended question. They gave us their expansion numbers in various methods, some by what counties they wanted to expand to, some by what regions they wanted to expand, and some by the number of, like a range of cases that they were hoping to expand to. So the good news, now again, that's a snapshot in time. It's what happened when we issued the survey. I think that was a very positive takeaway. It made me feel good. We did have a couple recommendations from that, and I'll just cover those right quick. And I think probably the most important one that came out of there, and this is based on, because we have had some case management providers who have gone out of business. So what we heard from other providers who were trying to increase their numbers was that to be truly independent, they felt like freedom of choice to the family needed to be offered by somebody who was not the outgoing provider. Because in many cases you had, I'm the outgoing provider, I've been hired by a new company, a new case management provider. So there becomes a question of how independent is that process on choice. So we did recommend that we look at DDSN, look at some possibilities on how to offer that freedom of choice to the individuals.
Because right now, like if I'm using a case manager and I decide to proactively switch.
Right.
But for the most part,
Right.
I'm ready to switch. You have to ask the case manager that you're assigned to make that switch and to provide the list of options.
Of approved providers for your area. And in this case, we were also addressing when those providers who said we are no longer going to be in the case management business. So those case managers were meeting with those families. Those case managers had been hired by another case management provider to transition them, yes. So there becomes a question of how much, what all choices are being offered to them. And if you had an independent third party that didn't have a dog in the fight, that could say, your case manager's going out of business, there are 6 providers in your area, and these are your options. And I mean, you know, there's no requirement that this has to be done by a case manager. This can be an intern that you hired that called families in the evening. But it's just, it gives a sort of a degree of separation so that that is truly independent.
Also, I mean, that case management company may not know all of the options in their area. They might or they may not, and so they're telling the family these are the ones you use when they might have changed, and it seems like DDSN would know the best what the options are, because we're the ones who keep all that current and know which ones are switching, which ones are going away, and whatever, right?
Right.
So,
And I'm going to go back to what I just mentioned earlier. A lot of times the resource that's utilized for that is the website, even by other providers. If you even take case management out of it, just another example would be, I'm serving a child and for early intervention services in the Low Country, and their family is moving to the Upstate. Assist them with that transition, but I don't really know what providers are available in that specific county they're moving to. I'm going to go to the DDSN website and I'm going to put in that county and pull those providers, and that's what I'm going to present to that family. So,
How long is that gonna take to get updated? Shouldn't that be updated all the time?
well, and that's what I was saying. If the updates won't take any, matter of fact, as soon as we issued it, they issued a work ticket on it. And then it's IT working with the areas, the program areas or procurement, so that when new providers are brought on, IT is notified of those and they can update it. And it doesn't take them a minute to update. It's a quick process.
IT needs to get moving on that.
I think they probably, I did have it on my calendar to check next week because we just issued it yesterday. But yeah, so that's all, I mean, we've got it on our calendar to follow up, but I think it's probably already been taken care of.
but your point is beyond just like somebody going to the website, that someone within DDSN should reach out.
Or contract it out to a third party, but that it be an independent party, not the party who is getting out of the case management business, where that case manager may have already been hired by a new case management.
This would be the responsibility of the case management company getting out of the business.
it's the responsibility of the case manager currently, and that's why we're saying it needs to go to a third party, so that it's truly independent. But that choice, when you are offering choice to that family, it is truly independent. It's not being done by somebody who may or may not have a bias, because they're going to work for another company.
I don't disagree with that, I'm just wondering who would pay for the intern or whoever would call. Would that be, who would be responsible for paying that person to do that research to see how you could move? Who you can move to?
Right, well, it depends on, again, it's a recommendation, management needs to choose to whether they want to implement it or not. But, you know, it could, this is not going to be a full-time job for anybody. This is really going to be when a case management company is closing. And like I said, the good news is we only had one that was projecting. So it's just really reaching out to those families in that scenario.
So it'd just be something we would take up as
We very well could. Yes, absolutely. And that's why we said either DDSN does it or contract with a third party. And then also in there, we just recommended that as we move to conflict-free, that DDSN have documented procedures on how that's to be handled. And part of those procedures need to be that a plan can be transferred. And we put 45 days. Again, management might want to look at that and say 30 days would work, or 60 days would be better. But what we, when we started looking into it, when we did have case managers, case management agencies that were closing, the receiving plan was already out of date, expired tomorrow, expired next week. So just to be fair to all, and you know, when a plan expires, the authorizations expire, and so you can't bill for those services. So we recommended that, you know, the transferring entity or the entity that's going out of business needs to make sure that all their plans are not within that 45-day termination. Any other questions?
I'd say it's remarkably positive that we only have one person going out of business, and it just goes to show that we did the right thing by going to fee-for-service for case management, and that others, only a short time ago, just over a year, thought the sky was gonna fall, and it obviously is not. And I'm very thankful for how that's going overall.
Yeah, and I would like to echo that. I thought it was very good news, and again, internal audits, thanks to the provider network for their participation, because without that, we wouldn't have the information.
And that basically just when Lori gives us those updates, that's the same stuff that she's been saying for the last 6 months when we get updates from her. So I mean, it just validates the information that we've already been provided.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Wonderful word, validate, exactly.
All right.
Any other questions with regard to internal audit?
I was just gonna ask, if you have any on the, BNI, switch, I know you know, continue to monitor that for us on a month-to-month basis and try and get the insights, from your perspective and the process and things going on, you know, in day to day that we don't look at every day.
Right.
So I just didn't know if there was anything you wanted to share on that.
You know, since last month when I presented on that, it had really just been our first delve into. We had January, and so the invoices were coming in and, you know, starting to get paid. And since then, I've not heard of any hiccups. I think it has gone smoothly on that end. I mean, there were a couple of small hiccups in the beginning, but as I mentioned, you're not going to go through a conversion like that and not have some kind of hiccup. But I think overall it has been an extremely smooth transition. And that would be for the BNI in terms of like community services, day program, respite, and that kind of thing. And then on the residential side of it, I think Pat covered in terms of the G's to H's and H's to G's, and moving with the process where DDSN will look at it and, look at those,
Right, evaluate.
evaluate, and look at the,
So are we technically still in phase one? Or are we on to phase two now? I know
I think this is
that we kind of
still
talked about it.
phase one that we're wrapping up, which was, because phase one was the Gs to Hs and Hs to Gs, those swaps.
Okay, I have a question for you. It really doesn't relate to anything you discussed here. You know, we're obviously in a transition phase here at DDSN. And, I am very concerned about, the agency as a whole. You know, we've got a lot of moving parts. We've got, you know, this audit coming up, you know, or we've got to respond to the letter. We've got, you know, all this stuff happening. You know, I really have a strong feeling about us having an administrative audit from the executive branch, here in Columbia. I feel like something we need. I think we need to clean it up. We need to make sure everything's clean before we bring someone new in. How do you feel about that? And do you think that that's something prudent that we should look at as an agency?
I will tell you that, of course, first I'll tell you, that's at your discretion. Then I will tell you, like, in the past, when we've had, say, if you took it down to a board level, a new executive director that's starting, that might be a good time for them to ask us to come in to look at operations and how things are going. And then it sort of gives them again, complex agency, lots going on. But it's sort of, in that situation, we give that executive director a short list of maybe where they need to turn their attention to first, where they may have issues.
And so you're saying do that in-house or do that through, I mean, I just feel like an outside independent agency looking at this might be a good, you know, it's the Office of Administration that offers that service, I believe.
Right.
And, I feel like, you know, obviously we're all, you know, we think what we're doing is the best. But I feel like we need to bring someone from the outside in to look at things. How do you think that's a good idea or?
Yeah, and I guess I was sort of answering that, equating it, so that's really what we recommend. If a new ED comes on board, we said, hey, call internal audit. And many of them have taken us up on it, and they have appreciated the fact that
I think a clean slate for them. I think a clean slate for that person. I think, you know, I think it's time for us to start that process, start looking at that. And, would you be the one that contacts them for us, or how does that process work?
I'm not sure with that because we have never done that before, to be quite honest. You know, we do have plenty of audits by outside entities. The LAC, MMO audit and certification team, but that's driven by them, and they're the ones that say, guess what you're gonna be doing next Monday?
Okay.
You're gonna be sitting in an entrance conference with us.
Why don't we just ask you to bring us a report on how that works next month?
Yeah, do you mind doing that?
I certainly don't know.
And if, you know, if it's something simple that we can move toward, I'd like to see us move in that direction so that we have a clean slate for the new executive director.
All right, certainly I'll find out what that process
That'd be
is.
great. Thank you.
All right.
So aside from that, Kevin, has anybody on the commission asked you to perform any other functions at this time outside of what we've talked about here today with regard to internal audit or in the finance committee? Have you received any other instructions from anybody on the commission?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay, thank you. All right, next time on the agenda is the legislative update. Kim.
Good morning, everyone. We've gotten the budget stuff from Ways and Means, so staff is taking a look at that. Doesn't look great, doesn't look too good for many agencies. But we do have the opportunity to meet with Senate Finance on April 7th, so we'll be giving them our budget presentation then. Now, we do have some
amendments to the provisos, 36.6 concerning the transfer of capital and property. There is a motion to amend the proviso to specify that the documents shall only be transferred and buildings to local providers when written consent is provided by the providers in an MOU and SPA approval. There's also 36.14, and that's with the Beaufort County DSM facility, and it amends the proviso to update the fiscal year from 2021-22 and reporting date to 2021. And that's all with the provisos. And then with the bills, the only ones that we've seen movement on is obviously S533. I met with Senator Shealy yesterday. She's very passionate about this bill and really wants to see it pushed through. During the subcommittee, what happened with the bill is that they did that 3-year phase-in approach. Because in the original bill, it was as soon as the governor signs it, it goes into effect. So that was suggested to the subcommittee, and they were agreeable with it. And so it's now moved on to the full committee. We don't have a date yet of when that will be done, but we have been asked to provide a fiscal impact statement. So we've reached out to providers to gather some information for them that might be helpful for the committee. And so we'll be submitting that to them as soon as we have all the documentation. Also, we have H3244. This actually kind of goes along with 533. It's the Employment First Initiative Act, and it creates the State Employment First Oversight Commission. And so there'll be a lot of different people on this commission, and their purpose is to create policies for competitive and integrative employment for people with disabilities. So if S533 is pushed through, we do have what I feel like would be a good support system and safety net for our providers who do have, and us as well, who have the 14C certificates. I know this is kind of it's a difficult subject, and it has a lot of moving parts in it, and there is a lot of different opinions. But what I would say is that given that our new administration, this is going to be something that they're pushing, or will be pushing. So I think it's in South Carolina's best interest to do it on their own rather than having the federal government push it down our throats. Because right now we have an engaged legislature who wants to help us, and we have state and private partners who want to also help. So we have a good support system in place, or that will be in place if this bill moves forward. And so I think that right now.
Do you think that the people that are pushing this bill forward have a sense of the detrimental effect that it'll have?
I did speak with,
It's clear to me that it would have a detrimental effect to those who work.
well, when I spoke with Senator Shealy yesterday, I did explain that because the the people that they use as the case models are much more high functioning. And so Senator Shealy and I did discuss, because I wanted her to be aware that this bill could be very detrimental to lower functioning individuals with disabilities. And when I spoke with the executive director of ABLE, she also understood those concerns. And
she obviously didn't understand them based on the conversation we were having. We couldn't even get her to shut up. So she obviously didn't understand that to me, but maybe, who else did you talk to?
I spoke with Senator Shealy. She's the sponsor of the bill, and she did understand our concerns about people with lower functioning and, who have more challenges that may not thrive in a traditional workforce as other people with disabilities. And so she's very understanding of that. And with the Employment First Initiative Act, SCDU would also be involved. So I believe that they would have some sort of function in maybe tracking how many people with disabilities become unemployed and how we get them back to employment.
Yeah, but I mean, that's kind of unemploying them in order to hopefully employ them again. I
I just think I need to understand the amount of unemployment that's gonna happen, because the sub-unemployment does not, it just gives them a piecework type way of looking at things. It does not actually give them a sub-minimum wage. It just gives them a piecework, and some people take longer to do things than others. I mean, it takes me longer, for the record, to type emails than it does anybody else, because my situation's not the same as everybody else in this room. So things take longer for some people that have disabilities, and if you do it, if they work on piecework, that's the same thing as somebody working for a regular minimum wage. And that, as I understand it, that's what the sub-minimum wage does, is work on piecework, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so everybody needs to understand, including Senator Shealy, that is a level playing field for those that have fundamental disabilities. It's hard for me to understand why people don't see that, or how we need to. I mean, obviously the bill is gonna, it looks like, I mean, you're saying that we don't, I mean, it's just, they need to understand before we get to the point of this new commission, of this new bill, what it's gonna do before that, and at least fully understand what they are doing before they do it. Because a lot of politicians truly don't understand that.
Well, Barry, I see both sides of this. I have a high functioning daughter, and, and while she does have some disabilities, her abilities, she actually tries to overcome those disabilities. So obviously I want her to be paid at least minimum wage for anything she does, because she functions at that level. But I also see it from the perspective of one of our local boards, for example, that owns a thrift shop. And they have folks working in the thrift shop to teach them those skills, those social skills, those sales skills, those counting money skills. And, while, you could have one employee and pay them the minimum wage, especially if it goes to $15 an hour, you can have one employee that works there. Whereas if we pay a sub-minimum wage to those consumers that are working there, we can obviously teach more of them that skill, because we aren't having to pay them as much. So I think that's important also to explain to them that way. But Barry, I want to say that I don't want to be rude, but I think it was very, I don't think you should have said that about the lady from Able, South Carolina. I think she was trying to provide us some information, and I think that we as a commission, it is our job to listen to all sides of this. And I commend her for taking the time to talk to this commission. So that's my 2 cents on that. Thank you.
And Senator Shealy and I did
Sorry, I use the wrong choice of words often.
I know, that's okay.
I apologize for anybody who has any offense to it. I'm just saying that she had obviously made a point more than once. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, Senator Shealy and I did touch on the $15 an hour minimum wage.
Good.
And so that's the good thing about the 3-year phase-in policy, is that if something like that does come up, then we can go back as a state and make any adjustments and make those with our partners. And that way, we know that we're benefiting, the people that we serve. So that, of course, is, something that Senator Shealy is aware of.
They could look at where they compensate for the difference, to what we could pay. And the minimum wage, if they want to pay them more, then they probably need to put more into the system for us to be able to provide that service.
And another thing that we talked about were possible tax incentives for businesses that hire people with disabilities.
Right.
Because if we were able to do that, then we could offset that cost with those. So she was very interested in that and is going to ask her staff to research that, to see, if we already have something on the books, is there something that we can add to the books, or if we need to create a new bill based on maybe another state's.
Well, I know South Carolina Voc Rehab also will also help compensate too, people who, for example, want to work, but they can't the company can't necessarily pay the full price of what they think they're worth. Sometimes South Carolina Voc Rehab will make up that difference too. Mm-hmm. So that's a great partner to bring in on this as well, I think,
Yeah.
to try to get vet rehab involved.
Yeah, they're definitely gonna be
Good,
part of
good.
the First Initiative Act. So
Right.
they're one of the people on that commission, as well as DDSN.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
I think ultimately it comes down to the fact of this bill's coming down the pipe. I think there's a decent chance that it passes based on everything that we're seeing. And so we have to be prepared, and we've got differing positions
Sure.
within this room. And I, much like Stephanie, have sort of, I can see both sides of it. It's a complicated issue.
Chairman, could I ask a question?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, this federal, as I understand it, the $15 an hour has been put into to the big not tax bill, but the big $1.9 trillion bill that was just passed. Is that right?
No, it's actually not. It's actually out of that.
It was put in but taken out.
Okay, so we're not having to face federal preemption then. Then the bill that we're talking about will just be a state bill, not a federal bill with the preemption issue. So the question that I have have we done, or should we consider doing something internally? I mean, with our own providers that have things like thrift shops and things like that. A survey that would simply ask if a minimum wage were imposed, could you please tell us what you think this would do to your hiring of workers under DDSN or under the auspices of DDSN or Voc Rehab? I mean, I think you could include just, kind of anything. And it would be interesting from a Voc Rehab perspective to see what their position is on this also. But I would like to see some numbers. It could be maybe if they're being paid minimum wage is what now? Is it $7.50, $8.50, something like that?
$7.25.
$7.25 currently.
Okay, $7.25, and if they're now paying at a reduced rate at a piecemeal kind of rate, maybe what is tantamount to $2.25. Well, what would this do? What would the bill do to them? So as to provide information to sponsors of the bill and the legislature as a whole. What about do we have any feedback from folks that are under our auspices about what forcing them to pay out of the carve out apparently that is in existence right now, but forcing them to pay at the current minimum wage? I hate to think what a $15 would do. That would be probably catastrophic for our folks.
Exactly.
But under the current law, what do you all think about that?
Well, Rufus sent out a survey yesterday to providers, both providers who have 14C certificates and those who do not, asking for their input. He's told me this morning they've already gotten 8 replies, so that's going great. They've asked them to have that information into us by tomorrow close of business.
Great.
Okay, so that'll give us something. Is that gonna? Well,
I mean, not only is it going to show, the question I would have about the survey is, does it show not only how many people would not be hired if that was happening, but how many people would actually lose their job?
Yeah,
that's what I'm hoping that such a survey would show.
Some people will lose
So
their
we
job
can
$15
so we can see the.
I can assure you, a lot of people. But anyway, go ahead.
yeah, it has 9 questions. It seeks information from executive directors or their designees regarding the number of individuals currently receiving substantive wages, how this bill, if it were to pass, how it would affect not only them as an employer, but also the relationship with their current entities that they're contracted with. And then, of course, we want feedback.
I can barely hear whoever was speaking.
Here, we'll switch seats.
Yeah, let him come up and say
Rufus is
this is
next
the point.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you're next anyway.
Go ahead, Rufus.
Thank you. Commissioner, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sir. We sent out a 9-question survey yesterday to executive directors who operate, provide day services, as well as those specifically who hold 14C certificates. And so the survey has 9 questions. The main point is to gauge the number of folks currently receiving sub-minimum wage and how if this bill were to pass, the impact that would have on the agencies as employers, as well as their relationships with the agencies or entities that they contract with to fulfill, the scope of work, as well as feedback from stakeholders directly. And so hopefully when we gauge that, we'll summarize it, share it with commissioners. And, but again, everybody's points are well taken, as well as the presentation from Abel this morning. Very complex, complex issue.
The legislature is always open to understanding unintended consequences. The thing that Barry was talking about, the equivalency of piecemeal being the equivalent to minimum wage is something that it could be a potential carve out. I'm not advocating one way or the other. I can see that, if I were in the legislature, being in favor of bringing everybody up to the standard. But if somebody, everybody understands that sometimes there's something that could go wrong. You need to carve it out some kind of way. I don't know if the bill of Senator Shealy was directed at people that are getting the piecemeal kind of work, or if it was in general. There's just lots more loopholes than us. But the one thing I don't think anybody wants is for people that are doing something productive with their lives, even if it's on a basis that would not be the equivalent of the norm, to feel like to lose their job and to lose the ability to produce and to work and to have some internal fulfillment, even if it's a small amount of money that comes in, even if it's a trickle that comes in, there's something psychological that's there. That's an unintended consequence of doing good when in fact maybe there is some fallout that you should have covered. So I think if we could provide and make sure, Rufus, that just make sure that everybody's responded. I mean, they shouldn't feel. I don't know if this is an anonymous survey or what, but they should understand that this could very well change how they're doing business. And more than that, maybe their ability to be able to produce at the rates they're producing at. So, I'm taking no position on the legislation myself. Maybe the commission might down the road a little bit to enforce our understanding of any negative fallout from this. But at the very least, we should be able to provide good information. So, Rufus, just please make sure that we're really hearing from as many people as possible, and they don't dismiss the survey as just a perfunctory thing. I mean, we will use what information to provide to the legislature if they're the quote unquote famous unintended consequences unquote. So, okay, I look forward to hearing the outcome.
Yes, sir, we will, and we'll follow up with those that don't respond. But given we just sent it out yesterday and already have multiple responses, that's a positive sign.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Isn't there some legislation that, I don't know, I felt like it was just written for governmental entities to hire people with disabilities? I felt like that was.
Whoever is speaking needs to get closer to the mic, please.
Now that you're back, wasn't there some recent legislation
Dealt with some guidance for, I think it was South Carolina, specifically governmental agencies hiring people with disabilities. Wasn't that a separate issue or a separate situation that was also kind of going on right now, or is it?
That's part of 3244.
Okay, it is part of 3244. And exactly what does it say regarding that? You have it in front of you. I felt like I read it the other day, and it, I just wanted to pause about this complex issue, and that part of it that is interesting to me, I guess. Yeah, I felt like I pulled it up, the bill the other day, or a bill the other day. I couldn't remember if it was part of this bill or not, and she says it is, but it specifically said the hiring,
Was it an email sent to us?
No, it was, I opened the bill online,
Oh, okay.
read it, and I remember seeing a certain part of it that talked about
I mean,
state agencies hiring people with disabilities and it being required, part of operating business. It's kind of how I read it, but again, I'm going totally off memory. And so I was hoping maybe you could read that part out. Do you see it?
Yes, the commission shall track the measurable progress of state agencies in implementing this chapter. All state agencies are encouraged to assist the commission in carrying out its duties by fully cooperating with each other and the commission and providing data and information in accordance with all applicable state and federal laws and their,
And that's in the bill?
It's monitoring, but it's not.
That's in the bill, Kimberly?
yes, and part of it is, there's been some amendments, so it's.
It's fine. I'll take a look at it later. I just thought it was quite interesting that that was part, I thought it was relevant that it's part of the bill. And I guess if it passes, what is this agency going to do to incorporate hiring people with disabilities?
Oh, I found the other piece to it.
Would be my, follow-up to that.
All state agencies and
Okay.
political subdivisions of the state are encouraged to consider adopting a policy that encourages competitive and integrated employment for individuals with disabilities.
So would we say we're already doing that because of our providers offering day programs, and already doing that? I mean, do we fall with, are we already doing that because of how we're set up and what we operate? Or would we have to make changes to the state agency to comply with that part of the bill?
Well,
I know it's a recommendation, but it's a guidance, right? However you just said it. I don't think it's going to be mandated, but.
yeah, the commission is not going to have any teeth per se. It doesn't give them.
So when you say commission, what commission do you mean?
They're creating a new commission.
Okay, gotcha.
And well, it says in, 41-5-130, integrated employment, and they actually define that, and it says it means with respect to an employment outcome, a setting typically found in a community in which employed individuals with disabilities interact with individuals without disabilities, other than individuals who are providing services to employees with disabilities. So we would, by our day programs, that would not be, by that definition, it would not fall under that.
Right.
And that's very vague to keep in mind. It's not very specific enough.
Okay, thanks for reading that. I just remember that being part of it. And
It's already passed the House, and it's been referred to, it's now in the committee in the Senate on Labor, Commerce, and Industry.
All right. Any more questions on the legislative update? Okay, thank you, Kim. Next, Rufus, you can take the seat again. Give us a COVID update, please.
Thank you. And there is a hearing next week, I believe, on Senate Bill 533.
It hasn't been published yet, so that's to be announced. Lisa gave me a heads up, so it would probably be the 25th.
When it is, maybe we can send something out to commissioners and then post it to the website. Definitely share with our provider network because this is important. Briefly, just a quick COVID update. First, I want to thank the commission for actions to incentivize our staff participating in vaccination. So I'll start there with some positive news in terms of the number of our staff who have participated in vaccinations, and some of this is pre-commission action regarding extending or availing a $100 bonus to personnel. But we have seen a slight uptick in folks participating in clinics that we've held, as well as staff who now can participate in vaccination as a part of phase 1B, also choosing to become vaccinated. So to date, we have a total of 577 members of our workforce who are participated in vaccination, and that includes about 20 central office personnel who qualify. That's about 38% of our workforce who participate in vaccinations, which it's low, but that's where nationally, I think you read a lot about vaccination hesitancy, and I think the agency has really done a good job with respect to their supervisors and facility administrators and executive directors in promoting the importance of participating in vaccinations. We've held town hall meetings trying to provide clarity and debunk myths associated with associated with not taking vaccinations, as well as provide science and facts that promote this as a positive initiative. So 577 staff, and as you all know, the commission approved availing the $100 bonus. And so for those who have taken us up on that and provided evidence, and we have a record of successful vaccination, the forecasted expenditures to date total $54,350. And again, not everyone has provided evidence if they participate in vaccinations outside of one of the clinics that we held at our regional centers. With respect to hero pay, which is for those working on the front lines, directly with folks who are COVID positive through February, total expenditures total $908,988. As I mentioned in prior meetings, we were successful in
Repeat that number again.
908 and 988,000, so $908,988 to date. And again, we categorize it as a hazard bonus, but I think we all agree that this is hero pay because the folks working on the front lines truly are heroes. The nursing sign-on bonus that we approved a couple of months ago, again, we're starting to see an increase in recruitment. To date, we've awarded $2,000 to nurses. We've attracted 2 nurses since we approved the nursing sign-on bonus. But since the last report, we've recruited an additional 8 nursing personnel, which is again well short of what we need, but it's a positive sign. If the 10 nurses remain with us for 12 months, the forecasted expenditures, for this program will be $30,000. Again, our hope is we continue with aggressive recruiting and retention efforts, which I know that there'll be a request for action during Mr. Maley's upcoming presentations regarding nursing personnel. But nurses are really vital to our operations, like many of our staff, but we cannot operate successfully, particularly those who operate ICFs, without licensed nursing personnel. So the COVID surveillance, real briefly, we're starting to see some declines in the number of individuals testing positive for COVID, which is positive, but we can't let our guards down because we continue to have, unfortunately, folks to test positive. And as of late, a couple of individuals who have passed away that test positive. So the COVID numbers, as of March 15th, we have a total of 1,400 individuals in our care who have tested positive for COVID, with 355 residing in our regional centers and 1,051 served through our provider network. Members of our collective workforce testing positive total 2,497, with 507 being affiliated with our regional centers and 1,990 affiliated with our provider network. And I mentioned fatalities, and this is individuals from our care that we've lost total 52, with 14 of those individuals receiving care in our regional centers and 38 being served through our provider network. And again, our thoughts and prayers remain with those we've lost, their support personnel, and their families. This pandemic has been unprecedented, so I want to thank the providers and really the parents of those we serve for all of the ongoing support and dedication, to our mission, and because we couldn't do it without the collective positivity that's been generated throughout the public health emergency. And lastly, during one of our meetings with providers, where I want to thank
How many employees have we lost?
employees within our system. We'll have to get that figure. We stopped tracking that in September, but we'll provide that to you. During one of the provider meetings, there were some commissioners in attendance, and I think that the providers were appreciative, of your attention and attendance there. But one of the executive directors made a plea, or at least a request, to evaluate the possibility of extending resources to the provider network to be able to implement a bonus plan similar to the COVID vaccination plan that we implemented. And so just some rough numbers regarding FTE figures or full-time equivalents, in our provider network should we entertain, that proposal. The last FTE report that we have is from 2019, which we used to provide information to the Executive Budget Office, and the total was 9,700 staff in our provider network. And if all were to have staff participate in vaccinations and we provided funding, similar to our bonus plan, the projected or approximate economic impact would be about $975,000. And that concludes my report, pending any questions.
I wanted to ask, about the vaccination.
Yes, sir.
Actually, I was in the bathroom whenever this occurred. I'm not opposed to it, but it's interesting that I was in the bathroom and we don't get bathroom breaks around here.
We don't either.
I know, sadly, but what I was gonna say was, can the vaccinations be paid by the CARES Act money?
Well, we haven't received so far to date, to my knowledge, and Millie, correct me if I'm wrong, we received about 2.3 million, which is well short of current expenditures, tied to COVID response
Oh,
efforts.
so we don't.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, I
Yeah,
thought
so-
we had more than we
yeah.
could have spent.
Now, there's a possibility that we could receive another round. I think it's issued quarterly. And so that remains to be seen. But right now, like I said, to the
So
last
if we
report.
had the money, it could be, but we don't know if we're gonna get the
Yes,
money
sir.
to do it.
Yes, sir. I would think it would be a qualified and unallowable expense.
I think, in my opinion, we have to wait and see if we get funding. I don't think we can just go out on a limb at $975,000,
No,
unfortunately.
unfortunately, exactly.
Yes, sir.
Any additional questions?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rufus. All right, moving on, new business. Back to you, Pat, on the nurse temporary salary increase proposal. Tab 5.
Okay, what we're recommending is, let me tell you about the problem first, and I'll give you the recommendation. We tried the nurse bonus for hiring, and we're having some traction at getting some candidates in. But as we talked to our head of nursing, Silly is a nurse, and we look at our own data, we've been declining since April, since the beginning of COVID. And they feel like they're at a critical juncture where they go much farther, we're going to actually run into safety issues. We've tried the bonus. We've increased LPNs from 38 to 41 during this period of time. The problem with our ability to pay equivalent market prices is the state's salary package is heavily on benefits. And the type of people we're trying to recruit tend to be younger employees who want to see, gross pay and net pay. So we just have a competitive disadvantage of hiring new people, particularly in a COVID environment. I just want to point out what some of the things Rufus said, hero pay. What hit us yesterday was when we looked at the regional centers, we have over 500 positive COVID cases. We only have 1,500 employees, about 1,100 are hands-on. So you're approaching 50% chance of getting COVID if you work in a congregate care facility. That was a startling number. So it's hard to attract in that environment, where maybe pre-COVID, our environment might have been less stressful than a trauma unit at Prisma. So we feel like we're at a point where we try to recruit. What we really want to do is stop losing people. And the people that we have on staff are been there a year. They see replacements, they see the declining rate, they're working more overtime, stretched thinner and thinner, and they keep on hearing chatter about, hey, I can go somewhere else and make more money. And they have. We just literally feel like if we do not do something to show our appreciation until we get out of COVID, and we lose a few more percentages, we are hitting health and safety thresholds. So I believe, I wish I could say it's going to improve hiring. I feel like if we do nothing and we keep on dropping, we could be in a a very, very bad place. So I'm not sure this is even going to work. And this is our best option to show the appreciation with some monetary reward. I think the appreciation is more the fact that we're doing it than the money itself. So we're just asking for a 3% 90-day temporary increase across the board, and that would be about a $42,000 cost for 3 months. And then we would just come back and re-up it every 60 days until hopefully we get out of COVID and get some breathing room. And also we're asking, when we looked at it, our hiring for nurses is $53,000, and we have a number of nurses currently making less than $53,000. So we'd like to take the opportunity to show appreciation to those few nurses under 53, true them up to 53, which would cost $23,000 a year. I wish I could say it's going to move the needle. I just want the needle from stop dropping, and we looked at the consequences of doing this versus DSPs, and DSPs have gotten dollar raises for the last 3 years. This agency and the General Assembly has really helped them significantly, and we feel like this is just a sign of appreciation for nurses who we desperately need to retain. So that's my recommendation.
And I noted in there that y'all looked into the contracting services, the temp services for nurses.
Yeah.
And the expense there is probably, the review group would probably exceed us giving this bonus to try to cover that basic number.
The temp services have gotten, not only the costs have gotten enhanced, there's just not people out in the temp service they can even provide us. But you bring up a good point, just to illustrate the workforce we have. When you look at our workforce, about 54% of our workforce is full-time equivalents. That means 46% of our workforce is part-time and contractors. So we have already an unhealthy transient workforce that we're relying on. And that was true pre-COVID. It's just gotten worse during COVID. So I just think we need to do something to demonstrate thank you and appreciation.
I'm looking at here at 53 and divide it obviously by 52 weeks in a year, and they aren't making but $1,019 a week. I mean, so that's
For nurses, yeah.
for a nurse, that is extremely low. I mean, yes, most nurses come out, start making a lot more than that. I mean, just to kind of give y'all a perspective on this.
We called around to the sister state agencies that hire nurses, and we're all in the same boat. We just,
yeah, I mean, the state agency numbers, the state is low for that. I mean, if you go look at well, they're having trouble recruiting them in hospitals too, but they're starting them out in the $70,000 and $80,000 range a year. So.
But we do have to keep in mind that our biggest benefit is benefits in the city. But I don't have a problem at all with bringing the people up to $53,000. You obviously have to do that if your minimum. We should have done that before now. If your minimum rate is 53, you have to bring everybody up to 53. And I don't have a problem with any of the. I don't have a problem with the program because it's a temporary program as long as we keep voting for this each 90-day period as we see things are going. One of the things I was going to say is that I think that an exit interview might be helpful to decide why these people are quitting. Because if it's not money, then it could be something else that we can't do anything about. So I think a detailed exit interview would be nice. So we can get an idea as to why they're stopping, so we can figure out how to prevent it from stopping without just money.
HR performs, or at least offers an exit interview for individuals voluntarily withdrawing from the agency. So that's a standard practice. We've held a few town halls with nursing personnel, and again, it's the wages, but also the amount of hours that they're working because of the workforce rule. And to Commissioner Lamel's point about outsourcing, even though we have relationships with outsourcing vendors, they can't even fulfill requests right now because there's just such a crisis with shortage with respect to licensed nursing personnel. So again, the people that have been loyal to us really, working a lot of hours, nights, weekends, and it's just not a healthy practice. So like Director Bailey said, this is to really show our appreciation for their commitment to the mission because they are in demand. So they can, try to go somewhere else, for higher pay and appreciate their loyalty.
All right. would then entertain a motion to approve the recommendation of staff with regard to the temporary rate increase and the truing up of any nursing staff who's currently making less than the starting salary.
So moved,
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
We have,
Aye.
okay. Ed? Have you-
Aye.
Okay, all right. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, that recommendation is approved. Financial update, Pat.
Wait, did we approve the 3% as well?
Yeah, I'd said to,
Include.
I included both, the temporary increase and the truing up.
Perfect.
Okay. All right, going on to tab 6, the financial update. Pat?
Okay, tab 6, you're looking at the standard monthly report, and all I want to draw your attention to is we're 66% for the year. We're spending 61% of our spending plan budget. And I would like to say that that's because we're great budgeteers, but we are great budgeteers, but we're under budget because a lot of our expenses, we're just underutilizing our services. We are underutilizing, we have money for at-home day programs that we haven't spent. We have money for a lot of the money that we put in the bands that we left there for replacement services. But we didn't leave it all in there. Regional centers are under budget, several, well, I think $4 million when I looked last, 3, and okay. And the issue is, you know, the expenses are down. The financial risk is the money that we leave in the bands that do not generate Medicaid billables don't show up in revenues on the backside. That's our risk, is revenues going down. And what we are doing by April, with the FMAP money, we're confident that we are going to have end of the year money surpluses. We'll have $49 million in 6.2% FMAP for the last 18 months. The question is how much is that going to be there on June 30th? But the next April commission meeting, we should have a cash flow forecast as well as a projected end of the year balance. I think that will help us with some of our planning for spending plan next year. So the expenses are good. I just don't want that to create a false sense of security. We still have revenue issues that we're still trying to get our arms around. The fact that we went to fee for service has stopped some of that hemorrhaging of missing revenue, because if you don't provide service, we don't have to pay. And I think that will prevent us from going negative this year, and that's been very helpful. Any questions on the budget? Expenses? I mean, I have some more financial stuff, just right here.
I don't have any, I just think it was a wonderful statement you just made at the end.
So before we get into the other financial update that you've got, is that all with regard to this document?
Yes.
Okay. So before we get into the remainder of the financial update, would entertain a motion to approve the financial summary that was provided.
So moved.
We have a second. Second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Hang on. Any opposed? Hearing none, that is approved. Thanks, Pat. Sorry.
I just want to take a few minutes from a financial update to really, I don't need any motions for this, not making any recommendations, but I believe, you know, one of the financial jobs is to look over the horizon at what's coming at us, so we have time to think about what we need to do. So what I'm going to try to do here is just go over items for us to start understanding, because we will be put in a position, future spending plan, a position of how to use some of this FMAP money to support our provider network, and this will just give you some building blocks for the future. I sent you guys like a 5-page document. It's in your tab number 6, and first page and a half had to do with old business. Page 2, where it says summary of financial issues facing DDSN. I'm going to break this into 2 parts. The first part is, in addition to what we talked about in the BNI for some underfunded residential beds. Now that the board network is out of the BNI band business, they're basically residential day ICF. And when you look at the ICF program we have, and what this came to light is we had one of our providers come forward and basically they're losing upwards to $400,000 or $500,000 a year. They lost significant BNI money, and they have basically said unless they get some sort of relief, that they're going to turn these ICFs over to DDSN at the end of the year. That caused us to do a deeper dive into the ICF program. And on page 3, you'll see a chart. And for everybody out there online who's not looking at the chart, in fiscal year 20, this is based on providers' Medicaid cost reports. They had $51.8 million in expenses, $47.8 million in revenues, for a system-wide loss of about $4 million or 8%. But I think what's important when you look at the providers listed on this chart, there's no providers listed, but each one's itemized. Other than a handful making a handful of dollars, the rest of them all are losing $4 million. I'm not suggesting we do something today. All I'm suggesting is that when you have one provider come forward and say, here are my 2 ICS back because I'm losing money, we're moving to a more of a market-based fee for service. I think we have to anticipate providers, even though they're quasi-governmental, acting more like businesses. And they made a business decision. And I think when we look at this and we go forward, I believe some of the solutions, particularly with the fact that we're getting substantial money for the, which I'll talk about in a second, for the from the $1.9 trillion federal act, that we may have some capacity to do something along this line. And Commissioner Mel was here in 17-18, and he was very involved in the issues we had then. And we had a lot of ICF providers ready to, if you take theirs back, you can have mine too. And I think we have to seriously look at that rate. And again, I think this is a symptom of getting behind in the rates. And when we catch up, just when we catch up, we're still behind. And then we get behind further. I'm hoping that market rates will get us ahead of the curve so that we can stay there. And I'll talk about that last. That's just for your awareness of what's going on in that industry. I did speak to the provider that has these issues, and we're going to do a number of things from a technical assistant perspective. Also, just to validate that they have the losses, because just because you report on a Medicaid cost report doesn't mean when we look at some of the allocations, there can't be some issues in there as well. So we have to run that down. Day programs, I think it's important to look at where we are for the at-home day program attendance. If you look at that chart on page 3, you'll see that right now in January, which is our last numbers, our at-home individuals are at 36% of their pre-COVID attendance levels. And you're thinking, hey, that's pretty good, it's a third. But when you look at the distribution, you have some that are way, way up there, and you have a lot that are still sub 36%. And the point I'm making is, if you're sitting in a provider network right now, and we talked about the BNI issue where that $4 million is about $333,000 a month that's out of the system. The current gap in revenues that they had pre-COVID, which they really had most of last year because the bands were pretty well supported by us, both through leaving 40% in, paying fee for service. We had a retro payment based on the pass-through rates. Believe me, there was some pain last year when it came to at-home day program, but on January 1st, the bans went away, and $1.8 million that used to be there last year is not there every month in the system. And when you talk to providers, you will hear we are bleeding in the day program. Now, the point I'm trying to make is I'm a economic-based person that if you ain't got the business, you have to scale back operations. But also, what is economic is if you want to ramp up operations, you're going to lose a lot of money before you get to where you're making money. And the examples I want to bring forward to you is, and I think this this is the real life examples that we're in, and Rufus can talk about this a little bit, but going through COVID, a lot of these day programs shut down, to include regional centers, and all these people moved to the residences because of the high turnover, of the people out on sick leave, and also we're able to provide day programs in the residences. Well, now that they're opening up, they got to have live workers to go do it. And there's just not a lot of live workers to go around. And so now that they're opening the day programs, they're starting to move people out of the residences. And I've talked to several EDs that they've stopped providing day programs in residences because they ain't got enough people to run them. And so I think they're hitting the ramp up phase where they are definitely going to lose money for a long time until they get back to some level of utilization. And I think as we look at our new FMAP money, we look at our old FMAP money, I think consideration should be in here of how we can stimulate or support them to ramp back up. I'm not proposing anything today. I just think it's something that we got to think about, given that we will have resources coming in the door shortly, and we do have resources once we get clear on this year's budget. But I also wanted to make you, this is not losses from depreciation. This is cash flow that's down about $2 million a month, $24 million a year in an industry that's $400 million industry, but still, that's a big lick when you don't have high profit margins. And if you go to page 4, I thought that little chart was it illustrates, that's straight utilization numbers there. Pre-COVID, we were at 69 million day program. The last 3.5 months of last year, we lost 6 million, and this year we're going to drop another 15 million. So we're on pace of having $22 million less in at-home day program utilization and revenue in our system. All right, going forward, these are the. I think this is more of the good news story. Going forward, unlike a lot of the things that we experienced in the last 4 or 5 years, is the 1.9 trillion federal American Rescue Plan. It's been passed federally, and it is going to provide a 10% increase in FMAP on top of the 6.2% FMAP starting April 1st. And it's not going to be for all Medicaid services. It's only going to be for home and community-based services. And so the details still have to be worked out by CMS and HHS, and they're going to have to identify the codes that are going to get the 10%. But my rough calculations is it would be approximately $40 million, 10% of $400 million, and probably even higher. But I'm not sure what codes they're going to pick. I know a lot of the codes you're going to pick, but some of the state plan codes that we consider home and community-based may not be considered. So we can, with pretty much assurance, that money's coming in starting April 1st through the following March 31st. And unlike the first 6.2%, this 10% is written for very, very provider-centric. The first 6.2% was to keep the state agency from going underwater because of historical flat budgets or negative budgets at the state level. This is for providers, and when you read the law, it says, I'm probably jumping ahead from my last section, but let me go ahead and hit it here. Is in addition to the 10% for these type of services, it must supplement and not supplant funds at the state level, meaning we still have to maintain our level of activity, and this is on top of it. And right away, that triggers cost report issues in my mind. So I think we're going to work that out. And then also, there's a required implementation of certain activities that was not in the law, but I've seen a number of subject matter experts across the country talk about ways to use the money. And we're going to have wide latitude on how to use this money. We're going to decide what we need, or obviously us and the providers will decide what is needed. But you can support the workforce, you can support expanded services, we can even affect people on the waiting list. So there's a number of options that we have. So even though that sounds like a lot of money, we basically have a full spectrum of options of what to do. And obviously we're getting a lot of the subject matter experts in DCs are publishing information. Some of the national associations are talking directly to the provider network about what other states are doing. And so we're engaged with the provider network on a weekly basis just to until we get firm guidelines of what to do, we just want to make sure everybody feels like that they're going to be part of whatever prioritization we happen to come up with. But that is coming, and that will be, because they give us so much discretion, I think that will be something that we're really going to have to do a good job at, so that it goes where it needs to go, and everybody has a bite at the apple in deciding where it goes. Fiscal year 21 ending cash balance. I'm hoping it's a good news story, absent something unusual. The only thing that gives me pause that we're not going to end up with substantial end of the year revenues is because of the way the band system worked for the first 6 months, when we put money out to the bands, if they're not utilizing it, we don't get the revenues on the back end. And we can pinpoint some revenues that we know we're not going to get, but because of the way the systems work, or what we run through our system is there's like a 3-month lag there in our waiver credits. We're going to work hard for the next month. So we come back in April, we'll give you a cash flow and an idea of what the ending balance is, which would then give us the platform to think about a spending plan and possible any relief funds that we want to think about. But that's something that we got to hammer down, and it affects our future. And this is 1 year money. And I'll get to my last section, which I'll jump to first, is when we go into fiscal year 22, and I'll tap on what Kim said. The House Ways and Means came out with their tentative budget today, and the only thing that we got was $2 million one-time money for Greenwood Genetics. Now, that sounds bad, but I think everybody else was in our same boat. There wasn't a lot of money to put out there, and I think it was put out in very specific targeted industries for targeted reasons. So
aren't they talking about sending money back to? In their talk that they're going to send a refund back to every citizen in the state?
Kim, I just looked at our part. And
You know that, Kim? You heard that?
No,
I think the governor put something out that he was considering sending rebates, $100 per person back to the citizens of South Carolina. And, I think we ought to check into that, and if he's going to do that, this is something we need to bring up, that, we're short on funds here, and where we're short.
Right. And I think from the FMAP end of the year balance, we can predict that we're going to have the same costs next year that we had to absorb this year, maybe not COVID related, but business related.
Okay.
And then the other factor that we have to factor in, the current administration is on record publicly that they want to extend the 6.2% FMAP through the end of the year. Now, whether they do it, how they do it, but the fact that they're on record they want to do it is a good sign that we may get relief through that mechanism as well. And then the last thing I want to talk about going forward is rates. And where we're on rates and how we can leverage your experience in this room as commissioners to help us get over the finish line. Back in probably late 2017, there was a hearing in front of the House Oversight Committee with providers and DDSN and HHS, and we talked about going fee for service. We talked about getting market rates, and here we are over 3 years later, and we have one market rate, waiver case management. I give great kudos to HHS. The new acting director over there has engaged us, and they've aggressively pursued taking that Mercer report and freshening it up with rates. And they gave us an opportunity to comment on all the assumptions on all the rates. And we took advantage of that, and we sent that information to them last week. We had a provider group, and it was the data lines up very consistent with raising the big issue is the day program rates. They're currently $31.29 per half day, and we believe it should be substantially higher than that. And as far as the residential rate, like I said earlier, that those aren't going to be established till possibly a year from now. But what they will consider is bumping our single rate if we can show a business case that their market rates, which are significantly higher than ours, that they could raise that, and we do have a state match. So I think I'm hoping in the next month or two, particularly when we get the fiscal year 19 cost report, that they should be in a position to make determinations on market rates. And then from there, they can set new rates if they want. And all they're going to look at us is, do you have the state match to do it? And so our job is to get a good ending year fiscal year balanced so that we see how much money we have, see how much recurring money we have, and hopefully at the end of the year, we should be in a position to at least get them to make a decision on, can you give us rates based on our costs as well as market rates? So that's the goal. And with that said, I think I'm on to the last issue. Anything on the finances going forward?
Okay.
And the last issue is the one you brought up, Gary, earlier on. We just need some guidance. There was an audit finding in a procurement office on a contract that there was 3 different invoices that aggregated over $200,000. And and the finding was that we violated the executive limitation policy of spending over $200,000. My point is, okay, we'll change it. The problem is when you look at the policy we've been using for the last 3 years has been focused on residential beds, bed vacancies, capacity in beds, because the whole issue was we were increasing residential contracts throughout the year, and there was some question as how they're getting those awards. So the commission just wanted to know these thresholds, and we report to you guys every quarter on that, or I think we might even every month on that. What we never really considered is we have a whole portfolio of other contracts at regional centers that exceed $200,000. And the reason they exceed $200,000 is most state contracts are like for a 5-year period. So even though I have a small $50,000 a year contract, if it's a 5-year contract, it's 200, technically it meets the definition. So rather than pull the trigger and overreact to the audit finding, because I think there's some language issues in the executive limitation policy, plus I would not recommend doing all that work and information flowing to you, to the commission on these regional center contracts, because I think a lot of it is just routine, mundane, laundry, food, those type of things. And that we certainly, I think what the finding did illuminate is we probably do need to give you some reporting over there so that you're not blind. But the question is how we report it to you, the frequency we report it to you. I think there's significant less risk over here with the regional centers contracts than on the residential bed, because that's something that the issue came up was how come some of the QPLs are getting, who getting more dollar raised than somebody else, and it was just like favoritism. There was no favoritism, but there was the appearance of favoritism. I don't think there's an appearance of favoritism on the food contracts. But what I recommend is just let us continue to operate as is, and at the monthly finance committee meeting, any contract that we approve over $200,000, we will bring it to their attention, just so that there's transparency. And then time permits, we will adjust the executive limitation policy in a way that gives you visibility, but doesn't create excessive administrative overhead.
Robin, I have a question. You're head of the internal audit committee, correct?
Yes.
What internal audit report are we talking about? Have we received an official internal audit report regarding this matter?
No, we have not.
That's what I thought.
So the report was more of a personnel discrepancy, documented, but
Okay,
it's not a formal AI report.
that's what I thought. Okay, that's fine. I have no problem with what you're recommending. I just wanted to clarify that is not an IA report.
Got it.
When we get an IA report, it comes in an official format, correct, to us? Is that correct? I'm sorry, I just need to clarify.
Yeah. But
And it's shared with everyone.
yeah, from procurement perspective, when a procurement officer has a tentative finding, they don't want to continue acting that way and look like they're disregarding. So
I'm aware it's not an actual IA report.
got it. All right.
Okay.
All right. Good to go. That's all I got. Thank you.
So I think that the staff's position is we should keep operating as we were, because again, there's been no formal finding. And again, it's just something that needs to be addressed. I know the policy committee is going to be looking at executive limitations, that that's an appropriate place to do, to make sure of it, and that we're keeping finance and audit apprised. You know, so the issue being there's no big spending going on that we don't know about.
We'll
That's the bottom line.
All the contracts every 200,000 every month, so that there's no perception issues.
I don't necessarily know we need a motion for that, because that's what the existing policy is. But does anybody have any questions or feel the need to make any motions with regard to that issue?
No, I just think that it should be put on, I mean, as a point of freedom of information, it should be put on the minutes what he just said. That's a clarification we're doing. That we should put that in the minutes.
Okay.
The sentence he just said, which you can say again, so you could put it
Okay.
in the minutes, but it should be documented.
Christie, do you have that?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
At 12:30, what, 2?
Okay, all right. Anything further, Pat?
That's all I got.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that update on the new business. Okay, so the next item on the agenda.
Yesterday, Commissioner Rollinson asked me to talk about the history of FMAP 6.2%.
Gotcha.
I don't want to bore people here.
That's okay, you can call me separate if you need to.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, all right. So the next item on the agenda is to move into executive session. Within executive session, would entertain a motion to enter into executive session on a number of issues, under legal matters, an update on pending litigation, and to receive advice from outside counsel regarding Senate Oversight Committee investigation and our response to outstanding FOIA requests, and in the area of personnel matters, personnel issues regarding the internal auditor, and to receive information from the search firm regarding the hiring of the new executive director. So I'd entertain a motion to enter into executive session for that purpose after taking a 10-minute break. Bathroom. Any opposed? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, take a 10-minute break. Come back for executive session. It is 4:08. We have risen out of executive session. While in executive session, there were two matters that were discussed that I want to put on the record that decisions were actually made. First, on the advice of counsel, we will be implementing a system where the commission members are given email addresses within DDSN to use for official business. And also, staff will be exploring options for us with regard to communication devices, whether that be tablets or some other device. The second item that we agreed to was as a result of our interactions with Finding Good People. We did agree that as they go through the job search, that they can seek info from our interim executive director as needed. Aside from those two relatively minor matters that we discussed, there were no decisions made, no votes were taken, no motions were made. The next meeting for next regular meeting should be April 15th, 2021. Is there any other matters to be brought before the commission this time?
Let me just say very quickly, if you're a member of the commission and have not given us your 200-word bio, we really need it in order to get it on the internet, and also we'll be taking a picture of you unless you send us one very soon. Or we'll be creating a picture or drawing it or whatever. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Nothing else?
Wait, Commissioner.
Yeah.
Commissioner Miller?
I just have one thing to say before it's put out there. Give us an opportunity to review it, okay?
Before anything goes on the web.
Oh, of course. They would be able to review it, but you're sending it to them what you want.
Yeah, you send them the finished version.
You send them what you want them to say, and it'll say just what you say.
Yeah, but we still want to look at it before it goes on the web to make absolutely sure that nothing.
Okay.
Okay, no problem. just make sure that y'all send it right away, because we're way behind the 8 ball on that.
Okay. Yeah, it's just time's of the essence. Let's make sure we get them in. Okay. Anything else? Hearing nothing else, would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So, second.
Thank you. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Uh,
We are adjourned. Thank you, folks.